As you probably know, the Bible is a composition of 66 books. Actually, at the time that they were written, none of them would have been called books, but we do call them that today. Some are narratives, some are letters, some are collections of poetry or sayings, etc. You probably know now that the books were written by different people and for different reasons. As such, it helps to understand the genre of Scripture. Genre is a type of classification. It has to do with the structure, wording, and purpose. When reading the Bible, I think it's helpful to think of the difference, say, between a legal letter, like a summons or subpoena, and a letter to your grandma. The legal letter will be formal, use a lot of technical words, jargon, have a specific structure with letterhead and watermarks and other official pieces, and have an authoritative purpose. The personal letter does not have to follow a strict structure. It will probably use personal names or nicknames, and its purpose may be much simpler, like just staying in touch. Plus, in the letter, you may use common idioms like die laughing or hang in there, with which the literal meaning is not meant. This happens in the Bible. The way we read and understand prophecy is different than how we would poetry. Each genre in the Bible takes different mindsets to understand its meanings. We start the Bible with narrative. From Genesis to Esther, the Bible contains narration starting with the creation and going up to the captivity of Israel. Narrative is basically anything which is narrated. Usually, this almost always means a story of some sort, whether fiction or nonfiction. As narrative, it's important to remember the role of the narrator. The narrator has chosen what to show, what not to show, and how to show. There is an agenda. It's just like how an author of a novel decides which details to give you about a character, to give you a quick sense of that character's essence. So, for instance, we start in Genesis chapter 1 with the narration of creation. This chapter is also a great example of another thing we find in the Bible, which is the mixing of genres or finding genres within genres. You'll often find a poem or song within a narration, or a mix of prophecy and narration, or a gamut of combinations. We begin with a narrative poem, much like other ancient poems having to do with mythologies. Think of things like Homer and the Iliad or Odyssey. Genesis uses figurative words to describe creation, and he does so for a particular reason. The first thing we need to do as readers is put aside all of our modern questions or concerns. Now, this is an impossible task, but we do our best. So keep in mind, this is not a modern document. This is not a history textbook or a science journal. At this time, the theory of evolution did not exist. The author was not thinking about scientific veracity or historical record. Genesis chapter 1 does not care about dealing with the theory of evolution. Instead, the author of Genesis wrote in a way which made God distinct from all other gods of that time. In sum, God creates the world in 6 days, fashioning a different part each day, and rests on day 7. As amazing of an event as that is, it is a boring story. Why is it boring? Because there's no conflict. There's no struggle. There's no evil god or monster of darkness to defeat. Instead, each thing is created without a fuss. This is different from all other stories. There is always a struggle. Sometimes it's killing a cosmic monster to create the earth. Other times it's defeating a god to create humanity. There are even struggles like scheming and conniving to give humans the gift of language. This does not happen in the Bible. Rather, God is always in control. There is no contest for divine rulership. He is the only being that is on a truly transcendent level. Genesis shows us the sovereignty of God through narrating the creation story. The next major genre we encounter is law. We read this mainly in Exodus, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy with the law of Moses. These laws set up a framework for the people of Israel to act as a nation of God. They were not laws that burdened the people as we might have a negative connotation of them. They were guidelines. The people wanted to know how to live in relationship with God and how to be good. They had just come out of Egypt and weren't sure what they were supposed to do. So God provided the means of knowing how to live in right relationship with Him and with others. When we read law, we cannot simply take and apply it to our environment. We have to get at the heart of the law and what it intends. For example, Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 21 contains the famous phrase, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, meaning the punishment will be equal to the crime. I'm sure you've heard criticisms of this, like the famous line, an eye for an eye leaves everyone blind. Martin Luther King Jr. voiced this criticism. I've read that Gandhi did as well, but that's not actually true, and the criticism has been around since at least 1914. Now, this distracts from even the foundational meaning of the law. The ideal behind it is inequality. You see, in ancient times, the upper class often got away with crimes, especially the king, since he was perceived as a god or a demigod. The Israelites did not take up this system of justice. Instead, everyone would be sentenced on the same level, no matter which class of society to which an offender belonged. Personally, I think this is a lofty expectation that we as Americans fail to uphold. If only we lived in a society in which the rich, powerful, and celebrity did not get away with crimes. If only we lived in a society in which government officials were held liable for their actions. So there you have the first two genres in the Bible: narrative, which narrates stories with purpose, and law, which provides a framework of meaning of how to live a righteous life.